morning, everyone. Welcome to our next panel virtually. It is about a practical guide to gleaning from getting started to volunteer safety. My name is Becca Simon, and I'm the Food Donor Relations Manager at 412 Food Rescue today, and I'm honored to be with these amazing panelists to talk about some of the firsthand stories and challenges and opportunities when it comes to gleaning, along with gaining insights around food safety, volunteer safety, and other organizational tips of how to get these programs started and how to keep them running successfully. Like I said, there really are so many amazing panelists today. I'm so honored. I got to go to the Association of Gleaning Organizations Symposium back in May, and I actually got to meet a couple of you. So it's great to see some of you and hear more from what your orgs do today. Just a couple notes before we get started. Just for the audience, so you all know, this session will be recorded, so please be aware of that, and it will be available and on demand after the event. So if you have to step out or anything, feel free to come back to this, or if you missed any of the other panels or won't be able to attend some of them, check them out later because it's all really insightful and wonderful information. And for audience members, please post your questions throughout. We might not get to them right away, but at the end, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So gear up some good thoughts and questions throughout this process. But if everyone's ready, we're going to get started. We'll be spending most of the time learning from these panelists via presentation. So take notes and really glean from what everyone has to say. Oh, goodness, we're starting out well with puns. To get things started, I'm going to pass it to our first speaker, Jeannie Hunter from the Society of St. Andrews, the regional director. Jeannie is the regional director of Society of St. Andrews, a nonprofit that gleans food that may otherwise go to waste, distributing it to agencies that feed hungry people. Having previously served as an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church of the U.S., her work at SOSA has led her to work and/or study local food systems, regenerative agriculture, food waste prevention, food justice, and public policy. Jeannie graduated from Eckerd College with a BA and Emory University with a master's in divinity, and is currently studying at Tennessee University MPA. She has a teen daughter, a cat, gardens for veggies and herbs, and too many houseplants. She appreciates all things crafty and with a special love for knitting. All right, I'm going to pass it to Jeannie. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. As Becca said, I work with the Society of St. Andrew. It's a gleaning organization, the oldest and the widest ranging in the country. And so I wanted to start out with telling you a little bit about what gleaning is and how it came to be. And the first thing to know is that gleaning is basically as old as agriculture. Since the beginning of growing our food, people have been sharing it with people in need. And sometimes that meant that people would come along behind after the harvest, people who were already hungry and people who were in need. And it was eventually codified into some Hebrew Bible verses that you might be familiar with. Nowadays, go ahead. Next slide. Nowadays, it looks a lot the same. The picture on the left is a bunch of kids out at a farm, and it looks almost the same as those paintings from a few hundred years ago. And the kids are out there harvesting kale. So in some ways, it looks so much alike. Next. Oops. In other ways, it's very different. We have trucks now and coolers and giant refrigerated spaces. And so contemporary gleaning can take on a whole different level of complexity than it used to have. Next. We also glean at schools. Kids have a share table in different elementary schools, and we'll go in at the end of the lunch period, and whatever's on the share table that didn't get picked up, we can glean that and share that with local agencies. And then we also glean farmers markets. Next. Sometimes there are whole rejected truckloads. Sometimes we glean with independent grocery stores. And there are all kinds of different reasons that this produce is being given up. It could be shape, size, color. Sometimes like the bananas aren't at the right curve. Sometimes the peaches are too big. Sometimes it's just the way the season has been when it's really warm and nobody feels like eating sweet potatoes. That can be hard on the sweet potato market. And so then they have a big glut of them at that after Christmas, when everybody's theoretically done serving sweet potatoes. So there's all kinds of different reasons that that produce is not considered good enough, even though it is perfectly good. It's perfectly nutritious. And sometimes it's even cute. Next. So we like to say that we help in 5 different areas. So we obviously help hungry people. We give our food that we glean to different agencies, and those agencies feed different hungry people, different communities. And so those people are getting some nutritious food straight from the field, fresh, really nice food. And that's way better than day-old pastries or something. So we feel really good that we're feeding hungry people with good food. We're helping those hunger relief agencies because that frees up some bit of their budget that they would have been spending on food, and hopefully lets them extend their services a little further. Farmers don't have to pay a tipping fee when sometimes their produce in the packing house would be going to a landfill if they can't, compost it, or they can't give it to the neighbor's hogs or something like that. And so we're saving them that tipping fee. And there's also a thing called field hygiene, where keeping the produce from rotting in the field actually makes it so that there are fewer pests the next year. And so it's really helpful for them to have us do that. This picture is a volunteer. We really feel like volunteers love to get out in the sunshine and get their hands dirty. And it's really good, especially for younger volunteers, to see where their food is coming from. And then, of course, keeping all this food out of the landfill is good for the planet for the sake of climate change. Next. In the past couple years, we have started, beyond just gleaning, we started measuring. We got a grant from the EPA to find out how much food loss is really there in the fields. There's been a lot of estimating over the years, but nobody has a really concrete picture of how much has been left behind in fields. And so we started to do that. We're out in the fields anyway, so we figured may as well just measure. And so we would measure what has been left behind after harvest, whether it's marketable, so like lives up to all those grocery store standards, whether it's edible, so it's healthy but maybe not pretty, or whether it's just completely rotten and you can't eat it. And we have taken lots of measurements around that and have found that there's really a lot more out in the field than people realize. Next. This is just some of that data. There's, like I said, a lot more out there than people realize. Next. If you want to glean, we would love to have you come sign up with us. And then if we are not in your area, or if it's a weird time of year or something like that, you can check out the Association of Gleaning Organizations, or you can just Google gleaning in your area. Next. If you want to start a gleaning organization in your area, the best thing is always to start with what assets you already have. Next. So think about every single possible thing that you have that could help contribute to this work. Do you have relationships with farmers? Do you know people at packing houses? Do you have people at schools so you could do the share table gleaning? All of those relationships are helpful. Do you have a group of volunteers? Whoever they might be, they're an asset that can help you get started. Next. Another asset might just be a friend with a pickup truck. It might be a phone and the internet, and you can get online and start looking around and seeing who does grow stuff and who does feed people. It might be your own backyard garden, some extra food you might decide you don't have to eat all those zucchini this year and you want to share them. So lots of different assets that you can start from next. And if nothing else, just your own persistence and excitement. Take all of those things and realize them as the assets that they are, and that they are a good starting point for you to do this work, and start making calls, start calling your neighbors. Next. Some other folks that can help you with this: extension offices know all the farmers in the region, so they are a good resource. Farmers markets are a good place because a lot of farmers are there in one place at one time. It's a good place to talk about things with folks. At schools, talking to the PTA or the PTO is usually the best way to get involved there. Teachers and principals are already overwhelmed with stuff to do. And again, lots of folks can help you with getting that backyard garden going. Next. That's all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeannie, for that very informative presentation. Definitely go check out Society of St. Andrews. I know they're all over the country, so there's a lot of great ways to get involved and learn more about the work. If you have any questions, again, please save them for after all the panelists present. This is a great opportunity to really learn from all three about these different perspectives and the work they do. So thank you so much again, Jeannie.
Thank you.
Awesome. Next up, we have Elise Year-Pethruni, the Executive Director from Rolling Harvest Food Rescue. Elise is passionate about advocacy and outreach at the intersection of food justice, environmental stewardship, and regenerative agriculture. She graduated from the Pennsylvania State University with a Master's of Science in Nutrition and worked in the hospitality industry for 10 years before starting a family. While volunteering with her children on a local farm, in 2012, she realized the significance of gleaning as a means to bridge the gap between nutrition insecurity and food waste, thus inspiring a transition to a career focused on equitable food access and food system reform. Elise worked as the program director for New Jersey Farmers Against Hunger for 9 years before joining the Rolling Harvest Food Rescue team in 2023. She lives on a small farmstead in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, with her husband and 3 teenage sons. Thank you so much, Elise, for being here. I'll pass it to you.
Wonderful. Good morning. Thank you, Becca. Yes, I'm Elise Year-Pethruni, and I'm the Executive Director of Rolling Harvest Food Rescue. I've been in this role for just about a year. Prior to that, I was at New Jersey Farmers Against Hunger, and I've been passionate about gleaning for about 12 years. Next slide, please. So Rolling Harvest Food Rescue's mission, of course, is to connect local farms' fresh, healthy, surplus produce to food and nutrition insecure neighbors in need, primarily through other food assistance agencies. Those would be our pantries and community kitchens, shelters, senior centers, and the like. But we also go through direct to client distributions as well, and free farm market style distributions. We started in 2010, and we started with one farm and one pantry. Our fearless founder, Kathy Snyder, was volunteering at a food pantry in New Jersey, and she was horrified by the lack of fresh produce options there. And of course, she was shopping at a farmer's market at some point, and at the end of the market, there was all this surplus food that would just have been composted by the farmers, and she thought there must be a better way to connect these two things, of course. She ended up being fired from her volunteer position at the food pantry because she was too helpful. But in the end, Rolling Harvest Food Rescue was born. So it all came full circle. Next slide, please. So since that humble beginning, we have scaled up, of course, and evolved to not only focus on healthy food access, but also education and advocacy around food insecurity, but also around food waste, effective land stewardship, and nutrition. Over the years, we learned from our recipients that we needed to offer nutrition and culinary education because the food that they receive, sometimes they wouldn't be able to identify it or know what to do with it, know how to prepare it. And so it would be wasted on that end. And that's the last thing we wanted. It kind of defeats the purpose of the food. So we started offering nutrition and culinary education, which is a big part of our mission and one of our pillars as well. Next slide, please. So it's a little small on my end. I hope you can see it. This is our 2023 impact report. It's sort of a visual representation of the logistics of our healthy food access model. We, in the center there, you can see that we work in southeastern Pennsylvania, just north of Philadelphia, and then just across the Delaware River in the Trenton, New Jersey area. And we partner with 45 farms in those counties and work with more than 1,000 volunteers each season at about 300 events, gleaning events included, and nutrition events. Last year, we collected 456,000 pounds of produce and proteins that might otherwise have gone to waste. It distributed to about 80 different community organizations, hunger relief organizations. That's the equivalent of about 380,000 meals recovered. And we recently just hit a milestone of about 4.5 million pounds of food rescued and redistributed since 2010, since our inception. Next slide, please. Okay, so now jumping into specifically into gleaning. If you are just getting started, I would establish those food rescue partnerships first and foremost. Identify where you're getting your surplus. Are you getting it from farms, from backyards, gardens, farm markets, all of the above, which we do. We like to approach farmers in person as much as possible. We've tried calling and emailing, and it's very. I see Jeannie shaking, nodding her head. It's difficult to get in touch with farmers in those ways. So we try to go to farm markets at the end of the markets and talk to farmers. So you can find some of your larger farms at Board of Agriculture meetings in your area. And smaller farms and beginner farms, you might reach at different local regional collaborations. For instance, there's one in New Jersey called CRAFT, which is the collaboration of a Regional Alliance of Farmer Training. And they have events that we can attend and speak to many smaller farmers at those types of events. So those are ways to establish those food rescue partnerships if you're on the farm end. And then next, you want to connect with your food assistance agencies. They are hunger relief agencies. You have to ask questions like, what days do you distribute? And do you have cold storage available? How many families do you serve? What do those families prefer when it comes to fruits and vegetables? Those are all good questions to ask of those organizations. And then as you grow, you'll need to work out transportation and the logistics, of course. As many of you know, logistics can be very complex when it comes to perishable foods. We started out small, and it was as simple as taking X amount of food to from point A to point B. But now with multiple locations and coolers and many different organizations we're delivering to, it's a lot more complex. So the transportation and logistics is really important. When you first start, you may be all volunteer run, which we were, and a lot of smaller gleaning organizations still are. But as you grow, you probably want to add staff, paid staff. And right now, just as perspective, Rolling Harvest has 3 full-time, 3 part-time staff members, and also a few contracted employees that work with us as well for different reasons. So, and then another decision that you're going to want to make is whether you stick with the distribution to hunger relief agencies and established organizations, or you want to branch out into these direct to client distributions as well, which is a lot of fun and very impactful. And then finally, if for all of these factors in this list, the key, I think, is outreach to recruit farmers, to recruit the food assistance agencies, volunteers. You'll want to attend fairs and events and work groups and conferences like this. And anywhere where you can speak to people and get the word out about the good work you're doing. Next slide, please. So volunteer safety, I should have titled this slide Volunteer Safety and Comfort, because we not only want to keep the volunteers safe, but also keep them coming back. As you all know, volunteer appreciation and retention is critical to any gleaning organization, because they're really the volunteers are the heart of our organizations. So at Rolling Harvest, we require all new volunteers to sign waivers that explain risks that are inherent in farm work. And we found that just the awareness of these risk factors really helps improve safety with us. And then the bulk of our events, of course, are outdoors, and so they're really weather dependent. In recent years, I'm sure you've all had this experience, we've had to cancel or postpone events for various reasons: severe heat, excessive rainfall, and even poor air quality, unfortunately. So due to climate change. So you can see that picture with the minor flooding in the fields. And we try to do it as much as possible, but sometimes you just have to cancel for safety reasons. And for a new gleaning organization, we highly recommend site visits to the gleaning locations. Scope out, the terrain. Some of our retired volunteers and retirees, depends on the terrain. They can't make it across fields. So that type of thing, shade, shelter, just in case, where you're going to park, the walking distance from the parking area to where you're going to glean. And of course, bathrooms. I can't stress bathrooms enough for folks coming in. And also, think about what tools and supplies you're going to provide versus what you're going to ask your volunteers to bring with you. We really only ask volunteers to bring a reusable water bottle and maybe a pair of gardening gloves, and ask them, of course, to dress to get dirty, although inevitably there's always someone who wears white sneakers or something like that. But the key is preparation, just making sure you're prepared for anything so that volunteers are safe and comfortable. Next slide, please. Challenges. So I think Rolling Harvest experiences some of the same challenges as everyone else, other food recovery organizations. There's oftentimes a need to convince our donors that, they want to donate food for many different reasons. I've heard reasons yesterday about labor and legality, food safety. In our case, it's less about food safety and more about allowing people in the fields. A lot of farmers who are not used to having customers or pick your own customers in the fields, they don't necessarily like having people in their fields. We're not always careful. So it's about that, and it's about efficiency. So we have to assure our farm partners that we have the labor, we have the tools, we have the transportation, the storage on the other end, and the experience, obviously. So, and then of course, cold storage is also a factor, a challenge for us. And you can see a cooler being delivered, one of our fresh food access hubs that have really transformed us on our end. Cold storage is really important. Along the same lines is sort of a staging and inventory space. If you're dealing with pallets and pallet jacks and forklifts, you'll need that space just to move produce around and get it repackaged to go to the places that need it the most. The changing agricultural landscape is more is unique to farm-based gleaning. Maybe we've had smaller farmers move towards hiring H2A workers, which they're the foreign agricultural workers. They're more efficient, and so we've experienced fewer donations because those farms are more efficient, and fewer volunteer opportunities at those farms because gleaning isn't as necessary at those farms. And of course, restricted funding. And I'll just go a little faster because I know I only have a minute. Next slide, please. Real quick with tools and resources. We used a volunteer app in the last 2 years called Milk Crate, or the Milk Crate helped us design it, but it was a little frustrating for our volunteers. So we might go back to email temporarily and then go back to an app to collect data on volunteers. It was very helpful for us to collect data, but on the volunteer end is a little frustrating because it would kick them out and then they wouldn't have notifications of cleaning opportunities and things like that. So that's to collect data on volunteers, to collect data on volume of produce in and out. We have been using Google Sheets, which works perfectly fine, but we recently went to SheetGo, which also does something similar, but really streamlines it for us when we have multiple coolers and inventory to go through. I'm sure you all use Canva, which is really helpful for marketing. Google Suite has been amazing for internal collaboration. Social media is amazing for Gleaning just because Gleaning is inherently last minute. So that's great. Social media is great for last minute calls for volunteers. Next slide, please. Just to wrap up, some quick action steps. You want to identify those gaps in existing resources, of course. You don't want to overlap anybody. Find out what's missing in your communities, who is not being served. Contact those farmers in person if you can, if you're working with farmers. And lastly, survey community leaders. These are the people who are immersed in their communities. They know what the real needs are, and their voices are not always heard. So it's important to survey them, find out what they need, what the community needs, and then base your plans on that. And there's my contact information because I went really fast at the end if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elise. Very informative and just really great to hear about the work that's happening on the other side of PA. Just saying hi from Pittsburgh. So amazing stuff. Next up, we have Lisa DeSantis calling in all the way from Hawaii very early in the morning. So we're very grateful for you being here this early. But Lisa is the program manager at the Food Basket with Harvest. Lisa is a co-founder and manager too. My apologies. I was like, I swear there's co-founder in there too. So amazing work. Of the Food Basket's Cocoa Harvest program on Hawaii Island with a Bachelor's of Science in Film and Video Production. She initially pursued a career in the film industry. In 2017, Lisa redirected her focus and served as an AmeriCorps volunteer where she specialized in healthy food access. Today, Lisa collaborates with various organizations to improve food security in her community. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being here today. I will pass it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for having me. Patrick, you can go to the next slide. Thank you for having me. Next slide. Thank you. Before I start, it's important to me. Yes, thank you. It's important to me that you know that this presentation will cover or allude to sensitive topics like accidents and injuries, physical and sexual violence, and stress, anxiety, and burnout. You do not owe me anything. Please excuse yourself at any point to take care of you. Next slide, please, Patrick. Thank you. So who am I and why am I bringing up these difficult topics so early in the morning? Like Becca said, I am Lisa DeSantis, Cocoa Harvest Program Manager at the Food Basket. Cocoa Harvest is the only island-wide gleaning program here on Hawaii Island. And at the beginning of this month, we celebrated our 5th birthday. Last December, I was on a harvest. I was alone, just like a little bit grumpy and super burned out. And the crop toner took a liking to me and did not take no for an answer. In those moments, everything I thought I knew about personal safety and everything I had been preaching to my team evaporated out of my head. And I'll note I was okay, like I'm okay. Nothing physical happened. I was just like super, super upset, just like really angry. And I didn't know what to do or where to go. And I just like had all of these feelings. So now I'm in front of all of you so that we as a gleaning community can start the conversations that keep one another safe. The image you've been looking at is one we took after our most recent self-defense class. The class is a result of last December's incident. We now offer self-defense classes every 6 months, usually with a practical component. I learned so much, not just about safety, but also like about myself, how I might react in a situation, and how I can work with my instincts to keep myself and everyone around me safe. So over the next few minutes, we're just going to explore 3 different dimensions of volunteer safety: physical, mental, and emotional. Elise kind of alluded to all 3 of those earlier, so that was kind of perfect. And I'll just add that not everything on every slide is going to be addressed. They're just starting points and notes for all of you. Next slide, please. So first, there's the obvious physical safety. For me, ladders immediately come to mind as a physical danger, one that many gleaning organizations don't even allow at harvests. I don't know if we have a super active chat today, but if you're feeling it, you can drop some other physical safety concerns in the chat. And as you do, I'll tell you a short story. We had a crop donor, super excited to donate his pineapples to us. He and we did a screening call, Elise. It went super well. We had everything scheduled, things were lined up. And then Kilauea volcano erupted. And while volcanoes might not be a physical threat to most of you, I encourage you to consider physical safety outside of the obvious. Elise had already mentioned things like weather, terrain, and I'll also add allergens too, like bees and pollen, or even allergens to the crops that you're harvesting. We regularly harvest mangoes, bananas, and ulu or breadfruit, which all have a latex-based sap that can trigger latex allergies. So what do you need to do? You need to be proactive, have a first aid kit at every event, communicate with your staff and volunteers that, like, mangoes, for example, can trigger allergies, or that a big storm is coming and you may need to cancel last minute. Practice situational awareness. What is going on around you? As staff or coordinator or whatever you call that glean leader in your organization, safety is your #1 priority. As you develop or refine your gleaning practices, I really strongly encourage you to consider reviewing your organization's safety guidelines and how they are communicated to your staff and volunteers. They mean nothing if they are not communicated to your staff and volunteers. Another outcome from December's incident is we now run all crop donors and volunteers through Hawaii's sex offender and other covered offender search as a baseline screening. It's free, it's online, it's just like really quick. I just drop them in. So far, so good. We also have protocols on what to do if not so good. Other protocols like phone screening crop donors and beginning every harvest with a quick overview of expectations help insulate your team. Cocoa harvest has what I call our respectations. There are respect expectations. I'm really proud of it. You can use it if you think it's funny too. Even when harvesting with volunteers who have come 5, 10, or even 20 times, it really sets the stage. When you begin with your safety expectations, people take it seriously, especially when they've heard it 20 times. Next slide, please, Patrick. Volunteering, we're going to move on to mental and emotional safety, and volunteering can be incredibly rewarding, and we hear from volunteers all the time how much it means to them, but it can also be stressful. Some common mental and emotional challenges include feeling overwhelmed by the workload, anxiety about making mistakes, or even experiencing burnout after repeated commitments. To support mental and emotional safety, consider the key practices on the screen. Like Becca said, I used to work in film, and the best producer I ever worked for used to say that his job as producer was to set everyone up for success and do whatever he couldn't hire someone to do. We are the producers when we're leading harvests in the field. We need to set our staff and volunteers up for success by making sure they have the tools and information they need to do what they came to do, which in general is harvest produce. You can also implement regular check-ins during the harvest. Ask volunteers how they're feeling. Do they need support? Encourage them to drink water, take breaks, have a snack, either one that they brought or maybe one from the field. We do a lot of tangerines, and they're like the perfect snack. And then we also want to help volunteers understand the importance of setting boundaries. Encourage them to communicate their limits and respect others' boundaries as well. I'm always setting boundaries for myself at harvests. For example, wrapping up early because it's too hot or wet or windy and I'm just over it. And I've noticed that the more I do that, the more our staff and volunteers do that too. On Hawaii Island, we have a pest called little fire ants. They're really tiny and really angry. Their bites are super painful. And when you get multiple bites, the pain compounds to be more painful than a yellow jacket sting. Not to mention that for days after, they're burning and they're itchy and they're just like, it's not good. And little fire ants are island wide, and we harvest at properties that have them. But we have volunteers who have set a boundary for themselves that they do not come to harvest that have little fire ants, and that's okay. Next slide, please, Patrick. Because of time limitations today, we aren't available to dive into everything, but what you can do if you're interested in this topic is reach out. Start conversations with those you connected with at this conference, at the AGO conference that was mentioned earlier. I'm always happy to chat with food rescue organizations, and my contact info is on the next slide. A challenge that we're looking for input on is cell phone service. Hawaii Island has notoriously terrible cell reception, and we are often at properties that don't have service. We're looking for best practices from other organizations and programs to help navigate that challenge and keeping everyone safe. Without reception, we can't call for help. We can't call someone's emergency contact. So if you have ideas or want to explore this safety topic further, please reach out to me, to others that you've met at the conference. Next slide, please, Patrick. Thank you so much for having me today. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that very informative presentation on volunteer safety. I know we've got around, well, it looks like it says 0 viewers, which just said 37, so not sure what happened. Oh, there they are, 35 viewers. So I'm going to challenge everyone to open up the Q&A in the chat, think through questions. If you've never gleaned before, or you don't have any gleaning organization in your programs, what do you guys need to do, or what do you need to know to start up these operations? I'm going to get started with a question just to get things going. But first, I just want to say thank you to our 3 amazing panelists for coming today and just sharing all this wealth of knowledge with all of us listening in today and those who will be watching the recording later. Just to kind of bounce off of Lisa's presentation around volunteer safety, I think one of the biggest challenges, no matter what realm of nonprofit you are in, is volunteer retention. Trying to get volunteers to move beyond a one-time volunteer interaction can be such a challenge. What advice do you have on, bringing in long-term volunteers, making them part of your gleaning operations, and really intentionally setting those relationships so it's not just that one-time opportunity? Feel free to start, whoever is feeling the most compelled to answer first.
We do a lot of group gleans. So like we'll have a big church group come out, and not everybody in that big group will come back, but usually we'll get 1 or 2 that'll become regulars out of that kind of thing. So if you can turn it into an event with a big group to start with, then sometimes you'll get a couple out of that. I think it's totally random whether people connect with it or not. We have some people that are just like in love with gleaning and want to come to every single possible thing. They're the people that like to get their hands dirty and like to get out in the sunshine and that kind of stuff. And other people are just like, yeah, thanks. So.
It's so true, especially for large groups, because you'll have the people who don't know why they're there and they don't enjoy it at all. And then of course people who love it. We are very lucky to have one farm partner who offers consistent gleaning. So if you can partner with a farm that does that makes it easier for volunteers to schedule their time. So it's a little bit easier for them. And we've been lucky to have a group of regulars who make it more of a social time. So we have a board member who makes popsicles. So we offer popsicles when it's hot. They're homemade, and and we have lots of breaks, and people talk to each other. And there's also sort of a volunteer garden there. So they leave with something. They leave with tomatoes or, some peppers or something, anything to make them feel very valued. And that's what we found, the groups keep coming back for those types of experiences.
Yes, and I would add meet your volunteer needs. If their needs aren't being met, then they're never going to come back. And I will second what Elise said about consistency. You can't have consistent volunteers if you're not harvesting consistently. Or we have the privilege of having year-round harvesting. But if you're not in an area that has that, host different kinds of events. We do a potluck before and after our busy season, which may be another way to just keep people engaged. And then we're very different from SOSA and rolling harvest. We don't do very large harvests. We do 5 or 6 people is kind of our biggest. And so I find that having that smaller, just really personal connection also just really helps. That may not be available to everybody, but it does help.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for those answers. I found that working with farms in the past and trying to get volunteers, it can be such a struggle. I know from experience with working with Emergency Food Network out in Lakewood, Washington, one of the most successful events they had when they had their farm was hosting wine and weeding and beer nights where they would connect with local breweries and vineyards to bring in samples of those products and to help connect with the volunteers. And I've also seen other models of, using the Gleaning products, and trying to bring samples of the food that it produces, if you have apples, bringing the applesauce, just so people can see and interact more with the food that is being utilized and picked that day. So amazing stuff. And thank you for those wonderful answers. I'm still not seeing any Q&A questions, so I will keep going with my questions so far. Oh, just one popped up. All right, from Ashley Snyder. Do you have any resources for best storage practices for different types of produce? Oh, very good question.
For us, it's about knowing what our recipients have, what the receiving agencies have for storage. So if we're going out to pick kale, we know we need somebody with refrigeration. If we're getting potatoes, it's not quite as urgent. But yeah, all the different agencies have different size cool storage or dry storage, and you have to keep that in mind with who you're calling when you have an opportunity to share that produce. We keep that all in the database with the contact information for those agencies, that kind of thing.
We don't have anything, but that's a great idea. Just a cheat sheet of different produce and their storage temperatures. We sort of know just from experience dealing with it for so long, and we have different coolers set at different temperatures for different produce. But yeah, a cheat sheet would be great for people, for new employees, and people who are not as knowledgeable about produce. Mm-hmm. Great idea.
We do not. We as a program don't actually keep any of the produce. We are harvesting and distributing same day, which really is a lot on one day, but it also, we don't have to worry about where are we going to store it because we get it out to the community as quickly as we can, which again, may not be available to everybody. It may not work for everybody, but it works for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I know storage and food safety is a huge conversation for everyone in food recovery, whether that be cold storage or trying to move it within that TCS time. So it's always great to hear about the creative ways people are interacting with that.
Ashley, there probably your extension or whatever your land grant university is in your state would have food safety stuff that you can look into. And there's all kinds of food safety information available online too.
Great resources. Speaking of resources, I just want to do a callback question. Bringing in Elise's presentation, you brought up a lot of tools and software systems you guys use to not only bring in volunteers, account for them, but also thinking about how do you track donations and how much you're taking in. So my question is, what are some practical tools, softwares, resources you all use to run your operations? what's worked? What do you suggest moving past?
I'll just jump in real quick with, I didn't mention donor retention, but we use Donor Perfect, which is fantastic to collect data on donors and send them their tax letters and all that good stuff. And then the app that we were using, it was great for us. It was, I think one of us was talking about cell phone reception in rural areas, and we mentioned it in our chat. And that is a huge issue with trying to use an app to have volunteers sign in, and sometimes just the paper and pen version works better. But the app, if we can find an app that is user friendly all the time, doesn't log people off, and that would be fantastic, because it really does help us collect data on volunteers, which is really important. So I don't know if anybody has any other experiences.
For volunteers, we use Mobilize and Every Action. For donors, we also use Donor Perfect. Our database is very old, Microsoft Access, like homemade thing from probably back when we started, honestly. But they are getting a new one, but it is again bespoke, and I don't know. We'll see how it comes out. I'll keep you posted.
We have a really, really amazing custom-built database from a man named Dick Yates of GleanWeb. I don't know if he will appreciate me sharing that, but he takes on 1 or 2 projects over the winter, and that's his sort of job. He does it voluntarily and for free. And I will give a lot of credit to Dick, because without that database and our website, like, that got us up and running so much faster than we could have otherwise. And because of Dick's experience creating websites for all of these gleaning programs, he had so much knowledge, which was like, he was answering questions that we didn't know we had. So it's like really a credit to Dick for getting our website and our database up and running. And that is like, to have all of this data just like at the forefront and really easily accessible has really made a big difference for our program.
We're all going to be emailing you for his contact information.
I should have checked with Dick before sharing, but yeah, I have so many good things to say about him.
We heard you do this for free.
Oh my goodness. Yes, there are so many amazing softwares out there. I know with the AGO, there's usually a monthly presentation as well about different software options too. So definitely check that out. There's tons that work for different needs of gleaning. So feel free to peruse those for those who are looking or interested in that. I know we're about at time, so I just want to start wrapping up. This has gone by so fast. I know I have a million more questions. I'll probably be emailing you all, but I'd like to encourage everyone, if you have any other questions, please reach out to our amazing panelists. They are nothing but a wealth of knowledge around gleaning with all this experience, whether that be regional, whether that be just from background of, starting up so many of these organizations or volunteer. Feel free to send that over, and hopefully you all can get those answers out and help, start up more gleaning around the country and around the world too. I know we have a couple international folks attending, so let's bring it everywhere. But just some notes to wrap up for our 37 amazing attendees. Please don't forget to fill out the evaluation after this. It helps us get feedback, understand what else you guys are looking to learn for in the next year's conference, and other ways we can help you guys get involved. I know next up we have another amazing panel starting at 11 a.m. We're going to have a 10-minute break. Go stretch, go get some water, go get coffee, whatever you need to get back and engaged. But the next session will be begged, borrowed, or bought, rescues by the truckload. So please stay tuned and keep on learning today. And thank you so much to everyone for attending, and our 3 panelists, Elise, Jeannie, and Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks, Becca.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jeannie and Lisa.
Bye.